Here we're going to look over Module 4, which has you focus on writing the literary analysis essay. This comes after reading many selections from Module 3. When we click on the essay overview, it says that the essay is worth 100 points, which is a lot, so you definitely want to have your work checked, reviewed, utilize that feedback to improve upon it. Then here, the instructions say you are to choose one story or poem from the previous reading. So that's any of the lists that you utilized in Module 3 when you're doing your previous homework. So any of those previous lists that we had for our class. Then from that one poem or story, you're going to explain how two literary elements are present in the story or poem and how those two elements help develop the theme or message of your story or poem. So when you're choosing the literature you're going to write about, you really want to pick one that you really understood the meaning behind it. What were we supposed to learn from it? What was the message, that theme? You want to have a really good grasp of that. And in addition, you also want to make sure that you have at least two literary elements that you can attach to that story and then connect to that theme. That might be the characterization, where you talk about one of the characters, how their actions, thoughts, feelings, motivations led them to develop that theme in the story. It could be the setting. Maybe the setting plays a part in creating the message of that story or poem. Perhaps it's the conflict. Maybe there's a person versus person, person versus society, or person versus self conflict that's going on that develops that theme. There are so many techniques you can talk about. Symbolism, of course, similes, metaphors, imagery. So you want to think back onto our literary elements presentation, and that's still in the previous module as well. If you need to review the literary elements, to think about two that are going to contribute to the message of the story. Now, that's just the brief overview. If you click on this document here, you'll get a much more in-depth overview of what you're supposed to do for the essay. So here are the guidelines, and here it gets a little bit more specific. So once again, you're choosing a previously assigned work. Your essay will be a total of 4 paragraphs. That's an intro, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And it's going to be 500 words or more long. And that 500 words is from intro to conclusion. You do need one research source for this essay. And it has to come from the SPC College database. If you want to use additional sources from the internet, you can, if you get them approved by me first. So first things first, definitely find your database source, because that's the requirement. And if you feel like you want to use a website, don't use it unless you've emailed me the link so I can check it for you. There are a lot of websites you really should not use for literary analysis, because what you use has to come from an expert. So if you pull up a website, you should ask yourself, who wrote it? Can you find their name? And then ask yourself, can I find their credentials? Does it tell you they have a PhD in literature from Oxford University? If you can't find those two things, the name and the credentials, don't use the website. Okay, so again, it's possible to use it, but at the same time, you need to have it checked and approved first. If you're pulling it from the database, just use it. You don't have to get it checked, because that is going to be a secure location to find expert material and previously published material. But if it's outside the database, then get it checked before you use it. Now, other things to note, utilize at least 2 direct quotes from the literature, 1 in each body paragraph. And the quote should not span more than 1 to 1.5 lines of your Word document. So no more than this. You might need to cut your quote, just for instance, do part of that sentence as your quote just to get the most important parts. But if you're over quoting and you're putting in more content than that, that's going to impact your grade. Use also MLA format for in-text citations. For the direct quote, it's going to be the last name and then a page number. You are, of course, going to be using your research source somewhere, either in body paragraph 2 or 3, in order to contribute to the discussion, to the analysis of the work. but you only have to use a research source once to meet the requirement. Other things that you write about can be from your own interpretation or your previous analysis. So for instance, if you wrote about the story of an hour before, I would encourage you to go back to your submission for your previous homework for story of an hour, fetch that work that you did, what you already wrote, look at any notes I might have left for you in the grade book, and then maybe even recycle that discussion or use parts of it in your essay. Once again, you're using MLA formatting. And like I said, you can utilize your own analysis. In-class discussions is not a face-to-face class, but ideally you can use your previous stuff. Also, you want to focus your analysis on the theme of the work and show how it's developed through the use of two techniques. And here are just some examples which I've already mentioned. Now you're going to follow these guidelines when organizing and drafting your essay. You'll create an original title that reflects the theme of your work. In the intro paragraph, I'm looking for the following. I want you to introduce the plot, basically what happens, but don't overextend the discussion. So as an introduction, especially for a short essay like this one, you're looking for 4 to 5 sentences total, capped with a thesis statement. So brief introduction, just summarize the basic premise of the plot and provide your thesis. The thesis has to give the theme or message about life the author is trying to convey, and then preview the two literary elements. So here's an example of a thesis statement that works for this essay. In Ernest Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, you notice the title is in quotes for that short story. The characters and the setting demonstrate that a lack of communication can damage a relationship. So here we have our theme. A lack of communication can damage a relationship. Notice that this theme, when I state the theme, it's not just specific to this story. I mean, I could apply this theme to many stories. So you want to have it kind of be a general life lesson when you're talking about the theme. Then also note that I noted two literary elements. I said characters and setting. So here are my two literary elements. I'll talk about characters, their characterization, and then the setting. And these are both going to prove that a lack of communication can damage a relationship. So the way this essay is working out is the intro paragraph, paragraph 1, is going to give a quick plot overview. Paragraph 2 of my essay is going to introduce the characters and talk about how those characters show a lack of communication can damage a relationship. Paragraph 3 is going to introduce the setting and talk about how the setting shows a lack of communication can damage a relationship. And then the conclusion will be a general wrap up that touches on the big ideas one more time, 4 to 5 sentences about that same length as the introduction. When you start your body paragraphs, make sure you use a topic sentence, give the big idea first, which in this case could be the characters in Hemingway's story demonstrate their poor communication towards each other. So I've got characters, I've got the concept of communication all wrapped up in that one statement. That would be a topic sentence or the first sentence of my body paragraph. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my body paragraph proving that that is correct, that the characters are showing that poor communication is bad for a relationship. And in the midst of discussing that in my paragraph, I'm also going to provide one quote out of the text, out of the Hemingway story, and also potentially my research. Make sure you only use third person. Sometimes people have been slipping in the first person I or me in their homework responses. Certainly no use of the word you either. So none of these first or second person words should appear in your analysis. The only time I should ever see an I or a me or a you is if it's in the quote straight out of the literature. Okay, because some of the stories are written in first person. So if you quote it, it might say, for instance, I saw the river Ebro across the fields of green. And that's like from Hemingway's story. So even though it says I, because that's a quote from the story, it's okay to include it. But you should never be writing I, as in referring to yourself, the writer, or the word you in a literary analysis, so third person. Okay. Nope, skip that blank page and go to the bottom. And then here I have what is an example outline. So basically here's the 4 body paragraphs And I have here examples for you as well of those topic sentences, how to start, for instance. And then what I'm going to do after that, provide the discussion. If I do a citation or do a direct quote from Hemingway, I provide the Hemingway documentation. So use this example outline as your guide. Now, it's going to be a few stages before we get into actually writing through the essay itself. So you want to make sure you follow everything that's going on in the module. There is also an essay evaluation rubric that you may want to look at some point, just to give you an idea of where the point values and things are going. For instance, like I said, editing, right? Syntax, grammar, mechanics, that's all grammatical related stuff, and that's 20 points. So that's why you do want to make sure you also utilize tutoring services when you can. Along with that, there is also a sample essay. So if you want to kind of just see how a finished product is supposed to look at the end, just get a big idea, you can read over this example essay. Again, it reviews Hills Like White Elephants as the example. Great story, by the way, if you choose to want to read it. But you can see that you have symbolism and setting are two techniques here. And you can read through this sample and you also have here the database source. So read through the sample essay if you want to have a better idea of how this is supposed to come about. Now, at any time you want to get your work checked or you have questions, don't forget you can always email me directly and also, attach your work or send me some of your writing, and I'd be happy to check it for you.